Disaster Survivors Strikes Back: Storms of Love and Loss by Christina J. Easley is a book dedicated to the survivors of natural disaster and man-made disaster. It's available on Amazon and Barnes& and Noble. If you buy a copy of the paperback, it will be donated to the families whose lives have been destroyed from disaster. They said Hurricane Irma was coming, and we didn't believe it. So we went on to the Home Depot and we got all of our supplies for the sandbagging and everything. And my wife came with me. We were a newly married couple, and she decided that she was going to help me sandbag the house. So we went and bought the sand and all the equipment that we needed. On the way home, we could tell it was going to be pretty bad. They said Irma was going to be a Category 5 hurricane, but we just didn't believe it. So we just kept on about our business. The traffic jam to get to the gas station wrapped around the block, but we just kept on about our business anyways. Well, after a while, it seemed obvious that Irma wasn't going to let us keep on about our business. My wife was 9 months pregnant at the time when the hurricane struck in Florida. We decided that we were going to stay. Well, our house is right there on the lake, and the rain kept coming and the wind kept blowing. And all of a sudden, we started to see the water come inside the house. And I said, honey, there's water coming inside the house. And you wouldn't believe what she said. I said, oh my goodness, there is water coming inside this house. We have a one-story house and we live right on the lake, out in the country, right on the lake. And this was our dream home. I was 9 months pregnant. And as soon as I saw that water coming inside the house, my water broke. It must have been all the stress and everything. My water broke. I went into labor, and Irma was knocking at our door around the same time that our baby was ready to be born. And my husband told me to come and get in the bathtub so I could at least have some place to give birth to the baby. So we ran back to the bathtub, and I labored for several hours until the baby's head came out. She was crowning, and the baby's head popped out, and I pulled his head out, and it was a baby boy. I delivered my own son during Hurricane Irma, and well, it didn't stop the hurricane from filling the house with flood water. Pretty soon after she had given birth, we had to go to the very top story of our house and climb on top of the roof. And we were on top of the roof for a good long time until the rescue helicopters finally came and found us. They had to rescue the two of us and our baby, and we were lifted into the air in the helicopters, and thank goodness we survived Hurricane Irma. We're the survivors, and I guess the hurricane did strike a lot worse than we thought it would, but we have our son and he's healthy, and we're just thankful that we lived through Hurricane Irma. That's all I have to say. Well, we're from Great Britain, and we were visiting Florida, and we happened to be visiting Disney World, Disneyland, around the same time as the hurricane. And well, my husband and I had to decide: did we want to go to Disneyland, where it was on the west coast, or did we want to go to Disney World here on the east coast? And we decided that we would go to Florida. And even though we knew it was hurricane season, could strike both areas. We were just so unfortunate to be caught in the hurricane. Um, my son is diabetic, and he actually needed his insulin during the hurricane, and we ran out. But we survived. We made it through the hurricane. It really didn't happen to be one of the worst events of our lives, actually. Well, there's diabetes, which we're diabetes survivors also. So the hurricane really was the second worst thing that could possibly have happened to us, actually. Many of the hurricane survivors of Hurricane Harvey also had to endure a lot of hardship. Hurricane Harvey struck Texas and drowned many of the major cities there in very high water, and their homes were flooded. Actually, we survived Hurricane Harvey. It came like a thief in the night, and the rain. Well, the storm itself really wasn't that bad, but the rain that came after the storm was actually a lot worse than when the actual storm itself. Our house is only 1 story high, also, and we had to evacuate the house, and we went to a church which was built on top of a hill as a shelter. And we got through that storm. I guess it was the grace of God, and so many people volunteered and donated their time and money to help survivors of Hurricane Harvey, and we pulled through just fine. Actually, I have a father who's in the old folks' home, and he was in the retirement home hooked up to a respirator at the time of Hurricane Harvey, and actually, he almost drowned in the hospital because he had to be moved to a higher level of the hospital so he wouldn't drown. And while the nurses and all the doctors helped immensely to keep my elderly father alive during the hurricane, but after the hurricane, we still had no home to go home to, and we were left homeless. And that basically is the reason why we needed so many donations from people to have a basic place to live until we could get rid of all the flood debris out of our house and rebuild our homes. It's taken us a long time to get back to where we were before the hurricane, but gradually we're rebuilding step by step, and we're almost there. Um, Many people had to experience a hurricane in New York City called Hurricane Sandy, and Hurricane Sandy devastated many lives there. Here are some of the survivors of Hurricane Sandy. We were in Hurricane Sandy, and actually, um, my daughter and her boyfriend are just coming out of high school. You see, Hurricane Sandy struck close to Halloween, almost on Halloween. So a monster basically came, knocked on our door dressed as a hurricane, or a hurricane knocked on our door dressed as a monster. Either way, it was one of our worst nightmares. My daughter is diabetic, and we have been looking for diabetes treatment for my daughter since she was very young. She was born diabetic, and it also runs in our family. But the issue with her was that she was staying with a boyfriend when Sandy struck, and I actually got stuck at work in one of the skyscrapers in New York City, and my daughter was at home. She was actually going to go to a party and with her boyfriend, and on the night Sandy did strike us. I was hoping that she had found high ground and that the storm surge wouldn't destroy our house too much because we live near the beach in the Rockaway community. And so she went to a party and she was ignoring the warning signs of the storm. And her boyfriend and her were just going to have a hurricane party and a Halloween party all at once. Well, what happened was they went to the party, but the storm did strike, and the storm surge started to flood the house where they were having the party. She had to leave the house, or thankfully they left the house because she was out of insulin, and she needed her insulin injections. Her boyfriend knew somebody who lived across town who
who had insulin. So they headed over there shortly after Hurricane Sandy struck and tried to get some insulin from her friend. But unfortunately, my daughter didn't make it to get the insulin despite all her efforts, despite all her boyfriend's efforts. Uh, my daughter uh, slipped away after the hurricane. The worst thing that could have happened to her was death, not just surviving the hurricane. I survived the hurricane. I'm a mother, and it's the worst feeling to to see your child be buried, to see your child dead and survived. I'm a Hurricane Sandy survivor, but my daughter is a victim of the hurricane because she didn't get her insulin. But life goes on, and so the hurricane did strike, and it did leave an indelible imprint on the lives of many people. Hurricane Katrina was one of the worst hurricanes to ever hit the United States in 2005. There were many Hurricane Katrina survivors that lived to tell the tale.
I own a gumbo restaurant. I'm a Creole chef, and I I operate my restaurant in the French Quarter of New Orleans. Well, the French Quarter of New Orleans famously doesn't really flood very often, so I basically weathered the storm by staying in my restaurant. But my wife, on the other hand, decided to stay at home. Uh, I arrived home. I weathered the storm, and the French Quarter restaurant didn't flood. I arrived home to find my wife in a disheveled house that had been ransacked by Hurricane Katrina. We also live in the French Quarter alongside the Mississippi River. Um, well, I went upstairs in my house, and the roof had been ripped off my house. Um, well, the roof was gone, and my wife, unfortunately, was pinned to our bed underneath all the roofing that had been ripped off of the house. We had to try and find a chainsaw or hacksaw or something to saw her, to free her from the debris. Eventually, my wife was freed from the debris, but she was in very bad shock, and we had to find some way to nurse her back to health. Well, instead of going to the Superdome like a lot of Katrina people did, we decided to go to back to my restaurant where there's plenty of food and where there's no flooding and where we could control the environment. So we went back there, and fortunately, my wife was nursed back to good health and everything was fine. But I know a lot of people who didn't survive. They were not survivors. They were victims of Hurricane Katrina. The flooding overwhelmed a lot of people. We saw dead bodies floating in the Mississippi River. We saw corpses lying in the middle of the street. We witnessed throngs of homeless people wandering the street with no food and no place to stay because that Hurricane Katrina had torn down their houses. And I had a friend who lived in the flooded Ninth Ward. His house, who his family had owned for two generations, now was completely destroyed, and this house was over 100 years old, and it was completely decimated by Katrina. I mean, the rain reigned over the city like an evil tyrant, like a dictator. It's almost like a foreign army had come marching into the town and taken over. I don't think an atomic bomb, would have hurt the city as much as Katrina did, as far as the just total destruction of the infrastructure of the city. But my restaurant recovered, and well, I had a lot of friends that died in Katrina, and a lot of friends that were left homeless. But we made it through. We persevered, and we survived. Hurricane Andrew was another such story where people in 1992 had to endure utter and complete destruction. They wanted me to go for a business meeting um, down in the Carolinas, and I was from New York, and I flew in to meet with several people. And around that time, they were sending hurricane warnings, but we sort of just ignored them, hoping that the storm wouldn't strike. But it did strike. And so we went down there, and the storm struck. And I had friends who were, I thought they were going to be in the hotel where they told me they were going to be. But some of my friends had gone to a beach house and gotten trapped on the island, Palm Island. Um, I had no idea the devastation that the storm had completely taken hold of. Uh, they never could fully comprehend what happened until you look at pictures of it. The devastation, the destruction. Their homes were completely washed away. And they were just, there's just nothing left. You just go there, and there used to be a house there, and there's nothing left. Hurricane Andrew was like the biggest storm that anybody had ever seen back in 1992. And I don't think I'll ever get over it. I mean, so many things have happened since then. 9/11 and various other incidents and the war on terrorism. But the natural disasters hit so hard and so unexpected. It's just devastating. And I don't think I'll ever get over Hurricane Andrew. Hurricane Hugo took place in 1989 and was also considered a very catastrophic hurricane, one of the worst storms to come inland toward the Carolinas, and destroyed millions of homes along the way. To find out more about hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, and avalanches, download the book as soon as possible and donate on the website. Tornadoes strike cities that are heavily populated and ravage and decimate the land. There is also impending danger and constant threat of, of tornadoes throughout the spring season, which is the tornado season in Tornado Alley. These are the harrowing tales of people who have survived tornadoes and lived to tell about it. I was only in like the fourth grade, and my mommy was home because I was staying home because I had the flu, and they wanted us to take flu shots, but I don't like flu shots, and my mom had a really bad experience with the flu shots, so we both stayed home together. And what happened was terrible because all of a sudden there were all these
tornado warnings. And I saw this huge tornado coming across the prairie at us. We were all alone in our house, started shaking really, really hard, and I screamed and started crying, but my mommy told me to calm down. I just couldn't stop crying. The tornado kept getting closer and closer, and it was snapping trees in half, and it was like a monster. I was inside the house with my daughter, and well, the house just started shaking, and we just kept seeing this tornado coming closer and closer, and there was no shelter. There was no place we could go. I mean, there was nothing. And we just kept seeing trees being snapped in half and lightning and bolts of lightning. And the house just started shaking and moving. And I wanted to run out of the house and find shelter, but we had been talking about getting a shelter built, a storm room built, but we just didn't get around to it. It wasn't top of our priorities. I mean, the tornado was barreling down on us, and all we could do was I grabbed my child in my arms as tight as I possibly could, and I held on really tight and watched that monster look right out the window at it. I mean, we tried to get out of the way of the windows, but our whole house is windows all around. So I ran and jumped in the closet, and I held on tight as I can. All I could hear is like a sound of a train or something coming towards us. And then we could feel the house just being ripped apart all around us. And it was being picked up and spun around, and the walls were just being torn apart. And then all of a sudden, I could just feel my child being ripped out of my arms. And I held on. The tornado was coming towards our car. Oh, we were hoping that it was moving parallel to the car instead of towards our car. Then we looked and we saw this huge black cloud touch down on the ground. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know where to go. All we could do was look in terror. We kept the cameras going. We kept the cameras rolling until we took these pictures. It looks like the black cloud of death coming towards us. What were we supposed to say? We tried to get the children into the interior part of the house. The house began to shake as this big black cloud came closer and closer and closer. We could see it throwing everything into the air, clouds of debris flying everywhere. We saw giant pickup trucks flying through the air. We saw people's houses being torn apart. All we could do was sit there and stare. All we could do was sit there and look at it. There was nothing we could do. Wring our hands and hope for the best, and hope that this monster didn't come and get us and kill us. That's all we could do. Tornadoes strike in the tornado alley every year. One year there was over 700 storms, and the residents had to endure these storms almost every day there was a new tornado touchdown. They had to prepare for it, but after the storm did strike, they could always count on their neighbors to help them rebuild their broken and shattered lives. Disaster-Free Survivor Strikes Back, Storms of Love and Loss is a book about all of the stories of happiness and joy when they escaped the storm, and also the stories of terror when they were struck by the storm. But what is best about the book is that it shows how the people did persevere to survive the destruction and terror that had destroyed so many lives. Many people died, but also many people lived. This was a life-changing event for a lot of people who weathered the storm. The book is available on the website www.disasterrelieffree.blogspot.com. The book is Disaster Free Survivor Strikes Back: Storms of Love and Loss by Christina J. Easley. Sometimes tornadoes strike around the same time that a hurricane strikes. During a hurricane, it's not unusual for a tornado to touch down. In the distance,